Out of David Masondo, the Deputy Finance Minister, and even the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services, that's Edward Kieswetter, was expected to have spoken a little bit earlier on. Mbali, won't you just share some sentiment, thoughts, what was actually being said a little bit earlier on this morning?
Good afternoon, Arabile. Yes, we did hear from SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter, as well as Deputy Finance Minister Dr. David Masondo. But, you know, what was interesting about what the keynote addresses, one that really stood out for me has to be the Commissioner's keynote address, where he spoke about how SARS was actually part of the state capture project. And he said that SARS was targeted by the state capture project. And he said that how they went about doing this was through the use of intermediaries and consulting firms such as McKinsey, Bain and Gartner. And he was saying that these institutions were used and were complicit in weakening governance at SARS. This was in the interest of basically fostering an environment of state capture at the revenue collection services. But you know what's interesting about what he said is that when you look at the testimony that's come forward at the state capture inquiry relating to SOEs and the state capture project, you see some similarities where governance was also weakened at these SOEs and the likes. You saw Transnet also witnesses testifying about how governance was weakened in order to foster an environment of state capture, as well as SAA and as well as Eskom. And basically he also talked about how they are in the process of rebuilding SARS, as well as restoring trust in the revenue collector. He also spoke about how it's a difficult task for them to try and rebuild SARS. However, it's a task that needs to be done, and it is in the interest of tax collections. You know, we've heard a lot about the shenanigans that went down at SARS that actually affected tax morale and taxpayer confidence. And he's also cautioned about talks about a tax revolt. I mean, because of the loss of confidence and the loss of tax morale, people have been talking about this tax revolt, and he's cautioned against it, saying that it is not in the interest of the country because it would prevent governments from creating a strong and capable state. So he was saying that SARS as a revenue collector is quite crucial in the democracy of the country as well as the economy, because it enables government to create a strong and capable state. He also talked about how they've started implementing some of the recommendations outlined in the Nugent's report. And we heard last week one of IT head at SARS was placed on precautionary suspension. She is not the first. There are a few others who have also been placed on precautionary suspension. However, she is the latest. One other person who's been placed on precautionary suspension is head of employment relations at SARS, Luther Lubelo, who appeared before the commission and spoke about how he was not he refuted claims that he was part of a purge to remove skilled individuals at SARS. Yeah. And then just going back to the state capture project and how Edward Kieswetter described it, is that he said that it was basically a project that weakened governance and that forced certain skilled individuals to leave the organization, which basically resulted in a loss of confidence from the taxpayers and a loss of confidence in the institution, and basically a weakening and a breakdown of the institution. What's also interesting about what the Deputy Finance Minister spoke about, Dr. David Masondo, he spoke about the weak economic environment and how it affects tax revenue collections. He spoke about how the budget deficit is likely to widen to 4.5% because of this weak economic growth environment. And he said that what's interesting about going forward is that we need policy certainty in order to grow the economy. And he also spoke about, he basically threw forward to the medium-term budget speech as well as next year's budget speech, saying that government will be outlining plans to cut government expenditure. Now, this is obviously going to send a very positive message to ratings agencies that have been flagging government expenditure as a risk to the fiscus and a risk to the country's sovereign rating. Yeah. For now, Arabile, it is back to you in studio.
Yeah, that Tax Indaba will certainly be quite revealing. And as you made note of there, of course, where we sit with regards to debt will be quite key. Those ratings agencies are watching in earnest. Our very own Mbalenhle Mthethwa, they're out at the Tax Indaba at the Sandton Convention Center, of course, giving us a breakdown of how things have fared. Your final markets update and even your weather details coming up right